Hi everyone, it's Tudor, the Vice President of ComSoc, as you might know by this point, and I'm really excited to welcome you to yet another fully online virtual STMU as we had them this year. So just to give you a brief overview of what we've prepared for tonight. First of all, we're going to have a nice talk from Phil from TransferWise. He's a senior engineer and he's going to be talking about his career, some of the challenges he encountered, the company he works at, and lots of other interesting things. And after that, we're going to move on and have a nice presentation from Ananya, a second-year student who's going to be talking about biocomputing. Obviously a very state-of-the-art field, kind of niche at the moment, but it's definitely not going to be niche in the future. And it's definitely a field of interest for many of our members. So hopefully people will find that quite interesting. I don't want to keep you any longer now, so can I welcome Phil from TransferWise?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Phil. It's a pleasure to be here. It really is. I wish it was physical. We'd have pizza and beer, but in the meantime, I hope to get up soon. But in the meantime, this will have to do. So I'm from a company called TransferWise, and I'll give you just a quick talk about the company, the debit card product that I've been working on for the past 2 years. That's been in development for 3 years. And my journey from graduating 5 years ago. I'm really excited to be here today. I apologize if this is rushed. So thankfully we have like a code freeze mid-December so that people can take holidays, and I'm really thankful for it. But at the same time, we've got a regulatory deadline to meet soon. So we're trying to rush to get things out, which is why this might seem a little rushed, but I'm trying my best. This is not focused, but now it is. So at TransferWise, we're trying to give access to money without borders. And what this means is that you can access your money anywhere in the world as a local. You're not getting ripped off by banks. You can spend at the real exchange rate without being ripped off. And we have a mission to do that. It's baked into the company DNA, and this is like a North Star around which we can operate and make decisions and discuss solutions to problems. So quite often we'll have a problem and it'll come up to two solutions, and we'll decide which one gets us closer to the mission faster. Our CEO, Christo, publishes an update of how close we are to achieving that mission every quarter on Twitter, and it's public. It's fascinating. Eventually it will be instant and convenient and eventually free to transfer money around the world. That we are dedicated to doing that, and it will be incredible. I don't know how many of you sent money internationally before, but it can cost quite a lot sometimes, but we're moving in the right direction. TransferWise has been around for about 9 years now, which is amazing. It's saved 9 million customers over $1.3 billion a year in bank fees. And for some reason the currencies are different there, but we're transferring 4.5 billion euros a month cross borders. And we're a profitable unicorn now for 4 years, which is something that not a lot of unicorns can say, especially in this kind of growth-fueled world that we're in today, where a lot of fintechs try to kind of gobble up as much of the market as they can at a substantial loss. TransferWise operates completely differently to that, which is how we're able to really attack a lot of these banks that are ripping off their customers. We're sustainable. And we can start talking about some tech now. So we have over 300 Java services, 70 front-end services, teams and teams of engineers from platform to mobile developers. We're continuously deploying 3,000 releases a month, and we have 70 nationalities. This came from 2 services to kind of a world that is now definitely microservices. And we've kind of built some products along the way. So Originally, it was the send money, but what we found is that people, expats living abroad, let's say I moved to Hungary, I would need a Hungarian bank account to receive a salary, and then how would I spend it? I would need that to use that Hungarian bank account. Whereas now I could move to Hungary tomorrow. I could click a few buttons in the app. I could have a Hungarian bank account and I can spend there. This is like amazing for the US as well, which if you're a US citizen living abroad, you have to pay to keep your US bank account open. But with TransferWise, it's fine. And we have a card to spend from that now. So yeah, I'll talk a little bit about the card. So before this became a thing, we noticed the exact thing we were talking about essentially just then, which is that people move to a country, they receive their bank account, they receive their salary into a bank account, and then they have no way to spend from it. So they have to transfer it to their home account and then spend abroad. And I guess a lot of you probably use Monzo, and you, like when you use an ATM or something, you're always supposed to pay in the local currency. Your like home bank account, if it's an older one, won't offer that. So you'll just be constantly being ripped off, which is why we came with the debit card product. And yeah, we've brought it to a lot of our customers. They're all international, all over the world, APAC, North America, and the European Economic Area. So coming up in 2020 as well as more countries and more features. So yeah, we've got a debit card, and it's really interesting. The world of the debit card, it's an incredibly complex system to make sure all that money moves around. So I'm going to give you kind of a little picture of what it looks like. So prepare yourself, okay? This is what a debit card system looks like. Now, with TransferWise, as often happens, we'll start with the customer and in the bottom left-hand corner. So this was a reference to a PR stunt we did where we called out banks on their hidden fees and talked about how transparent we are. So this is before I worked there actually, but a whole bunch of people got naked and like went into bank in central London and just like called it out on the lack of transparency. And yeah, there have been others, but okay. So the customer sends that JSON message that you see to the gateway, and that is the customer ordering a card. And that then goes through a whole bunch of services, the ordering service to create an order, the management service to kind of manage the cards and everything. And it finally goes, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Can you see my mouse? Nod tutor if you can, maybe. Okay, cool. So we have this, awesome. We have this payment processor, and they sit in between us and MasterCard and Visa. And what they do is they hold what's called the PAN, which is the 16 number on the front of your card. You need PCI DSS certification if you're going to hold card details, because if like when card details get out, like you're fucked. Sorry, I don't know if I can. So they give us this unique identifier, which we then use inside our company, essentially. So all we know is this unique identifier, and we use that so that we essentially just substitute it for the PAN. So yeah, we've now sent a message to the payment processor saying we need a card for this customer down here, and they then send it in this perso file, which is a personalization file. And that then gets sent to our manufacturer. We have a couple around the world now. And they print these cards physically and pack them into envelopes. It's an incredible machine. I've visited the manufacturers once, and it's incredible. They just pump out cards continuously, as you can imagine, like high street banks. They're just making so many. So yeah, then the cards go into the shipping company and then makes its way to the customer. So yeah, this is great. The customer has this card that they can spend abroad. And it's awesome. They go to the merchants, which is their card going over here, and they buy something. They receive goods or services. Now, the merchant sends a message up here to processors, eventually getting to MasterCard and Visa, and they then send it through a TCP connection to us through this to our authorization service. And all this does is check to see whether this customer has enough money, and if they, but some other things as well, but mainly we check to make sure that they've got the money to pay for it, and then it sends back the message to the merchant. This works a little differently if you're like if you can buy things from Ryanair on flights in mid-flight. That obviously doesn't send a message to Visa or MasterCard. It uses an offline payment method, but generally how it works is the card in the terminal actually goes all through that to get to the authorization service, and then responds, which is sometimes why it takes a little longer than normal. If there's high latency, it's incredible that seems fairly obvious now, but I find it absolutely fascinating. And then eventually, all of this needs to be cleared, and the money settled, and that's kind of a bit more on the finance side, but essentially like we need to transactionally make sure that the money goes to this merchant eventually, right? We can't just have like errors in that and people not getting money. There are fines and stuff, but kind of what I've been focusing on is like the bit around here, which is like making sure people can order cards. We've got some features. Actually, we've got a feature now in the app to make it so. Anyway, I'll talk all about that later. But yeah, I've been working kind of down here on the bottom left. Cool. So I think I've talked about everything on here. After 3 years, we're kind of now in the world of microservices. We've got 36 engineers. Oh, sorry. Can you now see Tudor in the bottom right? I can minimize that. Cool. Sorry about that. Sweet. So where was I? We are now in the world of microservices. We're using Jaeger, Envoy, all this cool stuff to make sure all that works well. And this came from essentially one service. We had a monolith, which can be a bit taboo, I suppose, but especially taboo when we started out. We had just 2 services, which one of them is still in use today. It's an absolute beast. And we've started breaking it up into 80 now. And then we come along and propose to start building it as a monolith. And obviously, engineers who've lived through this hell of breaking a service into 80 are just like, what on earth are you doing? Which is normal, definitely. So yeah, generally, the reason I'm just going to quickly talk about this is because I've worked with startups before, and they are trying to solve a customer problem, and they're just starting out. They know the customer problem they're trying to solve, and they're faced with a decision, really. They're like, do I build a monolith or do I start microservices? And it can work well, but I would say that it was really successful for us to build a monolith first and then break it up, because initially you're just extremely productive to have everything in one monolith when it's just a few of you working together on it. This image is from Martin Fowler, and it talks about comparing the monolith to a microservice, and timing it is quite important. So I think we can, so eventually, once you have a very large organization, microservices are going to help a lot. Initially, when you're just trying to solve a customer problem, I would really stress like launching with a monolith. And then once it starts to get big enough and you have enough people working on it that it starts to become complicated to deploy and complicated to manage, then I would start modularizing it, paying back tech debt, and eventually you have a microservice architecture, which is really good. I just wanted to quickly talk about that because hopefully eventually when you guys start solving, I suppose you already are solving problems, but it's helped us a lot. Breaking apart the monolith, there's a really good book by Sam Newman on this, but essentially, yeah, it's much easier to break apart a monolith than it is to start microservices from the start. And yeah, bounded contexts with Gradle modules are a really good way to do that, and slicing up the database as well. So yeah, hopefully that helps eventually in your kind of first, small projects. Oh, I'm not saying never do it, but like it's a really good way to learn to build like complex systems if you're doing it for interest. But yeah, if you're trying to like do something really small, I would definitely advise the monolith. And yeah, this is kind of just aimed at people who maybe join a larger organization where we were a couple of years ago. We had Feign clients with RESTful API endpoints over HTTP1, and we moved to gRPC. So I'll just very, very quickly cover this, which was really, really useful for us. I can't stress that enough. So it's a remote procedural call framework from Google. And yes, the client has a stub, which is from this framework, which calls a server from the framework using these proto request and response, which is also from the framework. So it's low latency. It's a really strong contract as opposed to like these JSON things that we were having. Like some teams would have really nice clients where they give you this module to just import, and it's beautiful. But some of them, like it was a mess. So yeah, this is like a really strong contract that you can use, and the layered design enables extension, which is amazing because all of our logging and monitoring around all of our gRPC stuff is now just like part of a library that you import, and none of your application code has to worry about like all this logging monitoring stuff. We've got these beautiful dashboards being created in Grafana that application developers don't even need to care about. It's amazing. And yeah, it's good because you have a whole bunch of languages that it supports, even Lisp. But of course, like there is like just no silver bullet that just solves everything. Like it's not just going to be perfect. So yeah, I'll just quickly talk about what this looks like. So yeah, you define this kind of proto message. Here we have a person, they have a name and the phone number. The phone number is an object which has a string phone number and a phone type, which is an enum. And here, so that is the kind of message that we saw being sent over the wire here, serialized. And then we have the service which generates the stub and the server side implementation. And this root guide service takes a point, which is just longitude, latitude, and returns a feature, which is whether that is enabled and what its name is. I'm not sure why you would ever create a service to do this, but there you go. And it's amazing because it generates code for you. It generates like code in the language that you're using based on this defined contract. Like it's great. We started using it pretty much everywhere internally. So yeah, if you end up joining a company that is still using Feign clients or JSON to communicate or REST templates, then yeah, hopefully this helps. It's good. One of the greatest things about it is forward and backward compatibility. So the convention is such that you kind of can't break the messages. And we're using some really interesting like caching methods for the authorization part, which needs to be quick. When you put your card into the merchant's terminal, that has to be super fast. So relying on something that's not going to break is like so useful. And yeah, there's less boilerplate code as well. It's like 10 times faster as well. It's like over HTTP2, which has a whole bunch of optimizations. So externally, we're still using JSON, although Improbable actually have started using it in the client, which is really cool. Maybe we'll start doing that too. I'm not sure. Internally, pretty much everything is now gRPC. So yeah, over the last 3 years, we've created something that now 1 million people are using. And This is really special for us because it comes out of this, like the culture of TransferWise, which is autonomy. So essentially, like a couple of people get together, or literally got together, decided that this was. Okay, well, I'm sorry if that's annoying. We'll have to live with it. So a bunch of people inside the company just decided to essentially solve this problem for customers who were getting ripped off when they spent abroad by creating a debit card, collected enough data to show that it was the right thing to do, and then just kind of did it. Like it's autonomous within TransferWise. There's this culture to go out, empower each individual engineer to solve problems and create solutions. And this is something that's really close to my heart. Like a year ago, I found something that I thought was like a really strategic thing for us to do. And I collected some data, eventually started working on it. And now it's like a core part of our team strategy. So yeah, it's amazing kind of what we've been able to do and like the culture that we've been able to keep as we've scaled up, like the ownership that we've managed to empower people with. Yeah, one of the things that's really kind of close to my heart when I graduated was getting customer feedback and failing fast and failing early. And yeah, I haven't talked much about that today. I've kind of mostly focused on the technical parts. I didn't really know kind of what audience and what you'd be interested in, but we did need to iterate really quickly on the ordering experience because we were like sending cards all around the world, and the ordering experience needs to be quite slick, otherwise people will like drop out. The funnels are really interesting. So that was the first service we actually ended up pulling out, was like the ordering part of it, because yeah, we needed to build that really, really quickly. And then yeah, one more thing about TransferWise is you have like the Facebook employees who are kind of meeting these engineers who've worked at investment banks like me. And it's a really interesting melting pot. So yeah, that's a little bit about TransferWise and what we've been spending the last couple of years on. So yeah, this is a little bit about me. That's me graduating in 2015, ready to go and work at an investment bank for 3 years before going to TransferWise after that. So yeah, I went to an investment bank immediately after uni. And yeah, if I may, I would be honored to kind of talk about a couple of things that I've wish someone had told me when I graduated. Yeah. So yeah. I recently became a senior engineer, which is why this has like offered me a really nice time to reflect on like the journey to get here. So yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, I would say that a really important thing is learning how to and when to say no. So in my first company, Morgan Stanley, they actually paid for a course for someone to come and tell us how to say no, because what graduates they found were so keen to make an impression that they would just say yes to everything. They would say yes to everything and end up doing nothing because they've said yes to so many things. They got so many things to do that they just can't do anything essentially. So yeah, like knowing when to turn down work to focus on what you're doing is like really, really important. And this like dogma is another thing. So it's critical that you understand what you. I hate to preach, but I've found it really useful. So yeah, understand what you're doing. When you do take on a lot of things simultaneously, one way to cut corners is to like rely on other people's knowledge essentially, which can be leaky, or they have only a part of it as well because they are also saying yes to a million things. But yeah, if you take a ticket and you don't know what you're doing, then you might not do it right. You might do it right sometimes, but often you'll just have no idea what you're doing, and then yeah, you don't want to look like an idiot when there's a problem with it and you've no idea why, you've just filled out a ticket. If you go to work at a company with microservices and they're still early on their journey, one way you can make a tremendous impact is by building libraries that end up going viral in the company and that tons of people start using. Like if you build one of the things, for instance, when your service is calling another service and it starts failing, generally what you'll do is you'll put it into like a task framework or something that retries the message, maybe like 10 times. But the service that calls you, the requests are now failing. So they will also do the same thing. So they will essentially also call you 10 times, which means for each request, you're now making 10 requests. That is making, it ends up going berserk and start killing services. So like a graceful kind of shutdown library or like handling of this load is really useful all over the company essentially, and that's a really good way to leverage yourself. I think probably most importantly is that like onboarding remotely is going to be hard, and one thing I'm really thankful for is that I've had really good mentors throughout my career. And I think that initially it's going to be hard for you guys to get that. So hopefully, I don't know what strategies will be useful in finding mentors, but I hope, I really hope you guys manage to find mentors. An alternative is a book club. I found I read one of the books that's coming up next. I read that last year, and 6 months later I didn't remember anything because I found at uni a lot I was just absorbing a ton of information and then doing the exam, and then like all of that knowledge goes out of my head and I'm like on to the next subject, on to the next exam. I found that when I read this book, I found it interesting, but nothing really stuck. So now what I've done is I go through it extremely slowly, kind of really test my knowledge on it. I really like take the time to completely understand it. And today, actually, I was talking to the principal engineer and managed to cut to the core of one of these issues by literally just verbatim talking about one of the concepts in this book. It's really useful, and a book club will be a great way to cement that understanding. Getting outside has really, really helps during remote work. It can be really, as I'm sure you guys know, I'm not sure how it works with Edinburgh Uni at the moment, but sometimes like make sure you go outside once during the day when you're working, and it's going to be super useful for your mental health. Group activities that we found really useful is each week one of us creates a Spotify playlist of 20 songs and shares it in amongst the team, and it just like brings everyone together. It's like a really good way to get to know people. We play Human Fall Flat every week at the moment. We're just trying to like keep up the social side of it, because soon we'll be back, and it's amazing when we're all together, but we have to do what we can. Last but not least, these are three books that have made a tremendous impact on my career. My mentor wouldn't let me join the team that I wanted to work on unless I'd read the third one, Agile Software Development Principles, Patterns, and Practices. Clean Code has the don't learning to say no part to it. Designing data-intensive applications is a Bible for high throughput kind of systems. I completely recommend it. And if you want to learn more about microservices, I would recommend watching some of the videos on Envoy, which is out of Lyft. I think it's now Apache, but it offers you there are some like introductory YouTube videos from Cloud Native Conference, and it's fascinating to see like some of the problems that microservices have and like what this solves. completely recommend it. Oh yeah, I should do the sales pitch, which is that yes, we are taking grads and interns, and this is like unlike any kind of, well, I'm sure like some, but yeah, grads and interns will be committing code. Like, well, we're moving so fast at this point. We need people who can, who want to solve problems and at speed. There's a process, and if you go to transferwise.jobs, click on students and grads, you'll see some stuff. This slide was given to me. I'm not sure why. Videos, blogs, and how to apply with 3 check marks are there, but maybe you find them useful. And yeah, lastly, like this should be the part of the talk where I start like firing swag into the audience and like the stampede to the pizza, but yeah, there's not some of that. So hopefully I can get up to a hackathon at some point, bring some swag, and yeah. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate the time. Hopefully you guys took away something. That's it. Cool. I will stop sharing when I figure out how to.
Yeah. So, hi again. We'd definitely love to have you over at a hackathon or another physical event whenever that's first possible.
That's awesome.
Thanks for the talk. It's been really nice. I know I appreciated the kind of personal touch towards the end. But let's look at some of the questions that people asked. Okay, so the first question that we got is, what do you mean by strong contract?
So what I mean by that is that, so let's say you have what can happen sometimes is you agree on a contract in Notepad or something, or you upload it to some like documentation, or it's written in pseudocode. And this happened. Someone actually told me about this happening inside an investment bank. Is that after like weeks or months later, they came to like finally link up the two services, and it didn't work because one person had interpreted the contract one way and someone else had not. So obviously this is like an extreme example, but that's kind of what I mean. Like this is not possible with gRPC really. And the way it promotes the writing of the contract and how it's shared between client and server. So I hope that's clear.
Next one is a bit more general, but what advice would you have for newcomers in this industry? You talked about advice for grads a bit later on in the talk, but specifically in this industry, is there any?
No, that's a really good question. I've had that before. Our UX writer came from working at the NHS and was just like felt a bit out of his depth because fintech is it's moving fast, but I think the advice I would give is to just like approach it with an open mind, find out what interests you, just don't put pressure on yourself to like pick it up overnight. It's something that comes after like a lot of kind of repeated action till it becomes kind of habit, you know, like I wouldn't put pressure on yourself to just like learn the domain. It will come in time. Yeah.
Let's see. This one got.
Oh, sorry.
No, sorry. You go.
Yeah, sure. So if you're interested, like a lot of these companies have APIs that you can start playing around with, and that'll help you kind of understand what these things are doing by actually using it, and that then when you actually join the company, you can approach it with on a really like nice playing field because you're familiar with the API, which is like a user interface in itself.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's the next question?
Yeah, this one got a few upvotes. So what's a good way of approaching somebody who want to mentor you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I find it really useful to kind of this remotely. I think it's going to be a bit more difficult. I think your lead can help with that. I think in an office environment, it's a lot easier to just like kind of be fresh faced and like ask people to go for coffee and just like start just talking to different people. I found coffee helps a lot, or beer as well. But yeah, mainly, coffee.
Yeah, I can get behind that piece of advice.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll think about that actually, and I'll maybe reach out to you, tutor, with some more stuff. Maybe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you want to send anything else, I can make sure it gets to.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. Yeah.
Looks like we got another one. Any advice for where to host our own microservices, or what TransferWise uses?
Well, we're on AWS. The one, I can't remember what it's called. A startup, like a friend has just started up, and he's using Heroku. Heroku is great. It's more expensive, but Heroku is great. I can't remember why. I've drawn a blank on why, but we found it really useful. I think there's less setup involved. Heroku.
Yeah.
I don't remember why. I'll send that over as well.
Yeah. Another one is, how many internship positions do you have available, and what specific focuses, like front end, back end, DevOps?
I have that. Someone added. Hang on. Am I sharing my screen?
I think you can.
No, it's okay. Someone wrote this as a note. Okay, so we have approximately 30 grads and 30 interns. We may have additional positions in analytics, people, team, finance, AML, but for computing, so that's in terms of the numbers. The next question was like, do I have a better idea of what they're going to be kind of doing?
Like front end, back end, etc.
Both. Yeah, whatever your strength is or want your strengths to be. We had a grad in our team, a couple of grads actually, who ended up building a transaction simulator for our staging environment. So it would just like pump out realistic looking transactions so that we could kind of test things in staging. So 3 of them built that. We didn't have any front end graduate developers, but there definitely are. Like, there definitely are. Web and Android and iOS.
Yeah. Other than this, it's just a lot of people that appreciated the chaotic nature of some of the slides, it seems.
Awesome. Well, glad. Hope you.
I can definitely get behind as well. Well, someone's typing. Right. So we got another serious question. What's your interview process like?
Yeah, I also have that. So first we go through an application review, which just like basic criteria. Then we go through a skills test. For technical roles, there will be a HackerRank test, apparently, or similar. But I don't agree with what. Yes, there will be a skills test. There will be a culture interview, which is just a video interview to check your alignment with our values, and a final interview, which will be a one-to-one interview or an assessment center to be confirmed very soon. So application review, skills test, culture interview, and final interview.
Well, we'll just give it a few more seconds, see if anyone else types anything, because there's a bit of a delay between us speaking and it being broadcast live. So just wait a bit longer. But I think that's been most of the questions.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume people are satisfied with your answers. So again, thank you so much for coming. It was great to have you, and hopefully we'll see you again at other events maybe.
I hope so too. Thank you. I'm excited for the next talk now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Right, so that's been Phil from TransferWise. Great talk. I'm happy to see that people engaged and asked quite a lot of questions as well. I think we got some very good points out of him due to the good questions that you asked. And now we're going to move on and listen to Ananya, who's going to be speaking about biocomputing. So Ananya, please welcome Anya to the virtual stage.
Hello. Apologies if people have already seen this content before. I have modified it, but we shall see. First of all, I'd like to ask a question. How do you envision cybernetic organisms or cyborgs becoming a normal part of your civilization? I'd like you to think about that as I'm speaking, and if I've done my job properly, your perception should have or could change on that front. So, what is natural computation? It's the field of study you'd most likely associate with terms like and hello, is my screen sharing?
No, we can't see the slides.
Okay, I can possibly do it without the slides. I'll do it without because... Okay. Is that up now? Right, let me try this one more time. Third time lucky. Is that up?
Yes.
Okay. I'll just carry on from where I was. There wasn't anything deep before that. Basically, natural computing is these three classes of research methods. And the difference between this and bio-inspired computing is that bio-inspired is a subset of natural computation. And there's generally a bit of confusion about what's the difference between AI and bio-inspired computing. There are close links because they both rely on research methods in machine learning, but the key differences are on their approaches to developing systems. So AI takes a creationist approach where the programmer is the creator, imbuing the system with intelligence. On the other hand, bio-inspired computing takes an evolutionary approach where it's more bottom-up and decentralized. So you're specifying a set of simple rules and organisms, and then methods of iteratively applying the rules to the organisms. These are usually programmed into a spiking neural network, which is a neural net that more closely mimics the behavior of the brain. And I'll come back to that later and go into more detail. But before that, why should we consider this area? There are lots of drawbacks, such as the fact that when we consider using natural materials for computation, the organic materials need considerable human assistance. For example, the addition of a catalyst at sensitive intervals or incubation. And on top of this, they'd need to go through considerable clinical trials before they can be released into the market, which further increases the delay. Then, even after this, there's the longevity of the materials to be considered, because proteins, which are the basis of these kind of systems, have a finite half-life. So we need to worry about whether the materials would degrade before completing a complex operation. And the biggest problem to consider is quite predictable, the pertinent ethical considerations. There is a potential for inappropriate iatrogenic steroid-like misuse of these materials, and they'd potentially result in unexpected or undesirable consequences that you couldn't predict because you've not had sufficient testing for them. And although this technology might improve the lifespan of humans or all kinds of life forms, it could result in a chain of unintended consequences that might exacerbate the problems with overpopulation. But the scariest thought is that if we can program organic material and integrate it successfully into living organisms, then so could a malicious party, meaning that they could create and spread infections that would potentially be more harmful and fatal than current pandemics. And I'm saying that during COVID, so just imagine how bad that could be. But despite all these warnings, we should carry on, obviously with care, but there are huge benefits of these systems if they can be properly implemented. For example, we're currently facing an issue with miniaturizing silicon chips because we're reaching the threshold of what's capable. But if we look at DNA as a method of data storage, then we can store about 108 terabytes in 1 gram of DNA, which is a little bit better than a silicon chip. And then after this, DNA replication is one of the most natural operations you can encounter in literally any form of life, plants, sea creatures. I don't need to go on. So replicating information stored in this form is far easier and a lot more accurate. And with energy consumption concerns at the moment, this research has massive advantages because operating with organic materials needs virtually no external power source because it relies on the change of chemical bonds. And then on the same tangent, using organic materials is more environmentally friendly when you consider disposing materials because they degrade as part of the carbon cycle and there are no toxic byproducts in the production or recycling process. So now I'm going to go through an overview of an area of research in each of these classes, starting with research inspired by nature. So here I'm coming back to the spiky neural networks, or SNNs, that I mentioned earlier. These, the innovation here is that they incorporate the concept of time with a property called the action potential. And as a result, they're considered third generation neural networks. The neurons in these networks fire very sparsely and asynchronously, firing a binary signal only when their input reaches a threshold value, which makes their mode of operation discrete, as opposed to a classical neural network, which has a continuous input and output signal. To further support the concept of time-based operation, each neuron in these SNNs reset to a resting potential that you can see, which sits below the threshold level. So because of this, when it next fires, the time at which the spike peaks depends. The time at which the spike peaks decides when the information contributes to a different calculation and which one it contributes to as well. One of the models that's most commonly used for this property is the leaky integrate and fire model, and that's the differential equation for it. Good luck understanding it. I've been reading up on this area for about 2 years now, and I'm still baffled. But if you get that, then fair enough. Moving on, this behavior ties into the property of connectivity. And this means that each neuron in each layer can, if it's fully connected, each neuron will be connected to every neuron in the previous and forthcoming layer. But with these spiky neural networks, that doesn't happen because that doesn't actually mimic the structure of neurons in the brain. Neurons in the brain are actually very sparsely connected, and that topology acts as filters, which you would have to integrate separately into a classical neural network. And in the brain, the structure is essentially such that there's a one-to-one interaction between neurons. So the sparser the connections, the more similar the spiky neural network is to our own brains, which is a bit counterintuitive, but that's what's happening. This approach produces a completely unexpected behavior from training because the involved positive and negative feedback loops and other properties are analogous to the rules of evolution, such as selection, recombination, and mutation. Here, training the system is equivalent to mimicking natural evolution by Darwinian and other selection processes, but this is on a much shorter time scale because we're taking advantage of the inherent lead time of millions of years because of mathematical models, scientific advances, and computational power. For example, natural evolution has already provided us with an almost ready template in the human body, which has already done the hard work of eliminating major mistakes over millions of years. So naturally, there are drawbacks with spiky neural networks, otherwise they'd already be the prevalent model. But our current computer hardware is not optimized for computationally intensive simulation of several differential equations. IBM has developed a neuromorphic chip called True North that has shown promise because it simulates neurons with their discrete, sparse, and spiking behavior. But obviously that hasn't really hit the market as of yet, so there are clearly some improvements to be made so far. There are also issues with supervision of the training in SNNs. Although there are various methods for unsupervised training, there's no currently known effective model for supervised training with a higher performance than current neural networks. And this is because the spikes aren't differentiable. So this diagram is the training trace of 3 different neurons. And as you can see, it's all binary, and you can't really differentiate that without major loss of information. But there are some current real-world applications for these networks in real-time audio and visual processing. So we'll see where this goes in the future. Now, moving on to the second class, which is using computers for synthesizing natural phenomena. One application here is that of artificial immune systems. These are a class of computationally intelligent, rule-based machine learning systems, and they sit at the intersection between bio-inspired computing and AI. This is one of the areas that kind of creates the confusion that I was talking about at the beginning. The possible applications of this area of research propose a complete rehaul in our approach to securing networks. Artificial immune systems, or AISs, and more specifically immunocomputing, focus on the mechanisms that proteins and immune networks use to process information, and as a result, solve complex problems, for example, defending the system. And the research here is done from 3 different perspectives. This understanding is then abstracted so that it can be applied to different problems. So one perspective is from a more biological stance, where the models are developed to better understand an organism's immune system. But the other two perspectives are of more interest to us because they're more computational. So the second one is quite metaphorical in that the aim is to develop algorithms, but rather than blatantly mimicking the immune system, it's used as a source of inspiration. Now, the final one comes from looking at immunocomputing very literally. The aim is to construct algorithms that mimic in vivo systems in silico, so literally synthesizing organic life. This is the perspective that could trigger a complete rehaul in the approach to cybersecurity. For example, mimicking receptors that can discriminate between self and non-self and defend against computer viruses would be revolutionary. And as computers become as widespread or more so than human life, our approach to securing them needs to start mimicking the innate defense system that has been tried and tested over millions of years, which is our own bodies. Again, as I mentioned earlier, all the hard work has been done for us. All the major mistakes have been eliminated. So why not take advantage of that? Now, I could go into more detail about the immune system and possible adaptations, but I have a feeling I'm running out of time and that's not as relevant. So basically, you can see the immune system as a network where the receptors are cells and how they trigger one another are the edges between them. But now stepping out of bio-inspired computing and looking at the final research method, the example I'm going to focus on here is DNA cryptography. So there's been plenty of research done into actually using DNA to compute complex problems. And an advantage of this is DNA can massively parallelly process anything, which also proposes then a complete rehaul in our approach to algorithms. Just like quantum computers are optimized for a certain type of algorithm, so would DNA computers, as it were. So DNA crypto is, of course, focused on securing information, and the information that you need can be recovered without revealing the whole sequence of data, because when a request is sent to a cell to create a new tissue, just the relevant strand is expanded and extracted, as you can see in this diagram. But the rest of the DNA strand isn't uncovered. It is very powerful, but then when you try to actually implement it, it does seem quite like a catch-22 situation. And here, DNA strands are essentially polymers of millions of linked nucleotides. And the nucleotides would essentially map to the encrypted information for us. These nucleotides are named after 4 different nitrogen bases. And coincidentally, 2 to the power 2 is also 4. So that seems like a natural link to be drawn. And an example of storing information in DNA would be to have each nucleotide represent a 2-digit binary number. Then the natural operations on DNA correspond to decryption, because the objective is to secure data by encrypting and keeping it secure at rest. This is a 2-stage operation, but again, I won't go into too much detail because of time. And there are immense advantages with this approach, like I said, with parallel processing. But the issue currently being tackled is that in a living organism, this is only a one-way process. So how do you stimulate the organic materials to reverse a process that shouldn't naturally be reversed? But ultimately, the technologies I've discussed here are part of the movement from the current rigid demarcation between computer and biological systems to seamlessly integrating them into one another. As we demand technology to be increasingly instinctive and adaptive, if we don't look at imitating the most natural complex systems to date, which is our own bodies, then we'll reach a threshold in the capability of computational systems. And on the flip side, as we develop computer systems more and more, we begin to expect more of ourselves. So then physical and mental enhancements will move to the form of integrating these biological materials that can be specifically programmed into our own bodies. And in fact, we're already heading there, because there are prosthetic limbs in general use that have the ability to process sensory input like touch and temperature. So now I'm going to move back to my opening question and ask again, how do you envision cyborgs becoming a normal part of our everyday life? Thank you.
Whoa, that was a seriously interesting talk. A lot to take in. I know we don't really have any time left, but I'd like to just ask one question that I can see on Discord now, because it's pretty interesting, I think. Do you have any advice for people who are interested in this field but don't know where to start learning about it? Like, what's a good starting point?
So that's essentially my situation. I have interest in this because I've got a medical background from my parents. So I just started reading materials that I could find. Like if you just have a look on any news apps, if something comes up that looks interesting, read it and then investigate that a bit more. And then if you can kind of build an understanding to a level where you can kind of throw that into an interview or something, then you will be guided into a relevant area. So my internship this past summer, I managed to kind of specifically state that this was an area of interest. So I was able to like arrange a conversation with a researcher who works on this kind of stuff. So it's basically a lot of initiative and reading around in your own time.
Oh yeah, that's brilliant though, the fact that you followed up on just the reading with actual experience in the field after talking to the right people. And I think that's a great point for people who are interested in just exploring any field, really. After you're done exploring the theoretical side, try to talk to the people who might bring you to more practical experience as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we don't really have any other questions as it stands. We can wait for a few seconds due to the delay, but anyway, it's a bit past 7 p.m. anyway.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't wait for very long, personally. Just give it 10 seconds, and if not, then I'll make the closing remarks and close the event. Yep, so it looks like people aren't necessarily typing anything else right now. So thank you very much, Ananya. This was very interesting, and it was both kind of deep in a certain theoretical sense, but the fact that we also had some practical takeaways at the end is even better, or very, very good anyway. So thank you so much for coming to our event today. We loved having you, and yeah. So that was the second part of this STMU done. Hope you enjoyed the whole event. I personally enjoyed it. I enjoyed both the talks. I enjoyed hosting it. And yeah, stay tuned because we're working hard at ComSoc to bring you many more interesting events in the future. And yeah, in the meantime, stay safe and stay tuned to all of our channels so you can see what we're preparing for you guys. Thank you.